8 Sleep makes a product that is amazing, which I love. It's called the Pod, and it fits around your existing mattress and cools down your bed so you can sleep better. They just released the newest model called the Pod 4 Ultra, which in addition to cooling down or heating up your bed, can even lift up your head when you're snoring so you can breathe better. It's incredible. To get $350 off, go to 8sleep.com/Pacman and use code Pacman. The link is in the description. Welcome, everyone. The DNC starts tonight. We have such exciting things happening, but I do want to start with some corrections, as many of you know. I don't relegate the corrections to the last 30 seconds of the show, trying to hide them where no one will see them the way so many newspapers do. It appears that there are some differences of opinion and maybe some factual inaccuracies from last week. Number one, there are people in the audience who do not believe that in the video I played, where I believe Donald Trump referred to Kamala Harris as an effing bitch, some people wrote to me and said, David, that's not at all what I hear. So if I got that wrong, then certainly I apologize. It's what I heard, but I respect that there are people in my audience who think, I don't think that's what Trump said. And then number two, J.D. Vance did a completely failed and pathetic event last week, which I said was with an audience of dozens of people. I received some emails saying, David, some of those reports about dozens of people were wrong. There seemed to have been about 150 people at the event. So I stand corrected. The event was still pathetic. The event was still weaponized nonsense. The event was still one held by the worst and least popular vice presidential selection in American history. But it appears he had about 150 people there, not dozens. So I stand corrected. Over the weekend, I received many emails from people saying, David, you know, one of the things I'm excited about is that we no longer only have to point out Trump's flaws and his horrible events, because we have something to be excited now for those who are opposing Donald Trump. The Kamala Harris events, and in particular, people loving Tim Walz, these are positive things to highlight. And so as much as now we are in the position of saying, look at this disastrous Trump, a bastardization of everything that is supposed to be American politics, we also can say, look at the great vision being outlined and presented by Tim Walz alongside Kamala Harris. They've both been good, but Tim Walz is really, really good at this. Let's look at some examples. Notice this is leading the show. We'll get to Trump's abortive rally later, but we are leading with, look at the incredible job that Harris and Walz are doing in exciting people. This is in Omaha, Nebraska, and here is Walz. It's almost unfair what he's doing to J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. He's so good at it.
And this idea about knowing us, let me ask you something on this. Do you think J.D. Vance knows one damn thing about Nebraska? He's going to be here next week. You think he's ever had a runza? You think he's ever had a runza? That guy would call it a hot pocket. You know it. Every one of you in here know it. A damn hot pocket.
There you go. So, of course, runza, for those who aren't familiar, I had to look it up. I didn't even know about it. A runza is a yeasty dough bread pocket with various fillings. You can get ground beef or a cabbage and sauerkraut, onion seasoning. And it's conceivable that J.D. Vance would relegate it to Hot Pocket status because he doesn't know what the hell is going on down there in Nebraska. Maybe more substantively, but the point here is just to show that Walz is very, very good at doing this. He talks about how J.D. Vance just isn't, at the end of the day, what Nebraska needs. Nebraska, known colloquially as a very red place, it's not going to benefit from J.D. Vance. It would benefit from Harris Walz.
Look, folks, in the heartland and in Nebraska and in Minnesota, we don't need a Yale-educated philosophy major backed by billionaire venture capitalists to tell us who we are. We know who we are. We know who our neighbors are.
This stuff is landing, and it's landing really, really well. The polling confirms it, which we will look at. And Walz is a guy who, you often say you don't want a vice presidential pick who's going to get in your way. That's what J.D. Vance is doing for Donald Trump. Forget about getting in Kamala Harris's way. Tim Walz is actually clearing a path for her. Here is Tim Walz talking about how the Trump vision of the world is very different than what Harris Walz bring to the table.
Look, we're positive, but I think we all know Donald Trump sees the world a little differently. You think he would understand the importance of Carhenge as a historical relic? The British made a replica of it out of stone. It's so important, so just so we know. Or do you think he would know the joy of tubing and swimming the Niobrara as we do in the summer? And this one's for the gray hairs in this room. You think that guy could understand the pure joy of pre-gaming at sidetracks before a Husker Sooner game? All I can say about that, too, is I'm glad there weren't video cameras around at the time. So we've been there. Look, in Nebraska, you got a slogan here. Nebraska, it's not for everyone. Well, it sure ain't for Donald Trump, I'll tell you that.
So, by the way, those curious about Carhenge, it is a Stonehenge-like installation made from old cars. It's kind of a random little thing. And Walz continuing and just really hitting the cultural notes as well as the policy notes. And this is something that's hard to do. There are elected officials, including on the left, who can really go deep when it comes to policy, but not necessarily in a way that connects with an audience. And then you've got the ones that are able to connect with an audience culturally, but as far as policy goes, they're not good at kind of drawing the connections and explaining the parallels between the cultural and the policy stuff. Walz just does it, and he does it effortlessly.
This guy is the opposite of everything here. Every opportunity he has, he weakens our country to strengthen his own hand. He mocks our laws. He sows chaos and division amongst us. And that's not even counting the time he was president.
He continued talking about this connection to the working class. And this is actual working class rhetoric that connects to the person using it. And I'm going to play this in a moment. But remember, as we watch this, as we listen to this, rather than billionaire Trump's false promises in the context where he has no clue and has spent his entire life trying to be kept away from the very folks he now is trying to convince to vote for him, Tim Walz's reported net worth was something like $150,000 or $300,000 or something like that. And he does actually have an ability, not only empirically, but also rhetorically, to connect with the average person.
You've heard the vice president say this. She said, only in America could a woman from Oakland, California, who worked shifts at the local McDonald's while she got her degree, be our nominee for president of the United States. When I heard the McDonald's story about that she's worked at McDonald's, like so many of us growing up, took jobs to get by. The funny thing to me is, can you picture Donald Trump working the McFlurry machine? Oh, he knows us. He knows us. He couldn't work the McFlurry machine. Many of you in here did. But I have to tell you, from her first day as a prosecutor, and then as a district attorney, and then as the Attorney General of the state of California, a United States Senator, and our Vice President.
So these events going very, very well. And by the way, forget about Trump working a McFlurry machine. I would question whether Donald Trump could just make pasta. Would he know how high the water level should be? Where to figure out how long you boil the pasta, to open up a jar? And I mean, I genuinely don't know that the guy could make pasta, never mind work a McFlurry machine. So things going really well for Kamala Harris' selection of Tim Walz. On the other hand, things going very poorly for J.D. Vance. We can now say empirically, J.D. Vance is the least popular vice presidential pick in modern American political history. It's an incredible thing, given that Trump's track record of claiming that he is the best at hiring people has been proven wrong time and time again. Washington Post reports JD Vance is unusually unpopular as a vice presidential pick. Trump didn't just pick a guy who's not particularly popular. He picked a guy who is particularly unpopular. There's a very good piece in Washington Post's weekend edition by Philip Bump, and it explains both the polling and the sort of qualitative story about J.D. Vance. And in looking at historical vice presidential picks, you see that if you look at Vance, it's just the absolute lowest when it comes to viewing the candidate favorably and strongly favorably. It's the lowest numbers. There's just no other way to do it. This is the percentage. The Independent also reporting J.D. Vance is now the least popular VP candidate in modern history, even below Sarah Palin. Polling shows Vance has a -9 net popularity rating, even worse than Sarah Palin's worst number back in 2008. What's particularly satisfying about this is that you can be a good or a bad selection as far as policy is concerned, regardless of popularity. You might be the type of person who has 5 proposals that either as a senator or as a governor or whatever you've championed that people like. And then there's just something personality-wise about why people don't like you or whatever. Or it could be the opposite, where people like you, but there's absolutely no substance there whatsoever. In either case, you can fall into problematic thinking. Like, for example, strictly speaking, evaluating a candidate only on popularity is, in a sense, an appeal to popularity fallacy. However, in a way, it is a popularity contest, particularly when it comes to the VP. And more importantly for our conversation, Trump sees everything in terms of popularity and ratings and who likes me and who likes my friends and that whole thing. And we know from numerous reports that it is killing Trump that Vance is so disliked. Is it killing Trump enough to fire J.D. Vance? Probably not, because then he'd be implicitly admitting that he made yet another hiring mistake, dozens of which, of course, we already know he made, given all the people he hired during his first term, who he now says are absolutely horrible. But no, I don't think he's disgusted enough with the J.D. Vance situation to fire the guy, but time will tell, and the polls are not looking good. I want to talk about that next. Once again today, Kamala Harris has her biggest lead in the average of national polling that she has had in this entire campaign. But David, sir, didn't you say that last week? Yes. And didn't I say that the previous week? Yes. Every week, Kamala Harris is setting a new high water mark with regard to national polling. Let's take a look. First and foremost, on average, Harris now leading by 1.4 percentage points. Last week, she breached the full point lead. She is now pushing to 1.5. And where does it go next? I don't know. But when you look at the trajectories of polling, when you look at the red line of Trump and the blue line of Harris that I have on the screen, you see Harris line go up, Trump line go down. And that's the trend. And we will see to what degree it continues. There's a new piece in the New Republic out this morning. Trump in real peril as new polls show Kamala Harris has many paths to victory. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And also NewJersey.com. Harris versus Trump, latest presidential poll is another 5-alarm fire for Trump. This is referring to yesterday's Washington Post ABC Ipsos poll, which shows that Trump has net favorability of -22, and Vice President Kamala Harris has net favorability of +1. That's a difference of 23. Kamala Harris's favorability is 23 points ahead of Donald Trump. Now let's talk a little bit about multiple paths to victory. This map on the screen, and there's a visual element here. I'm going to do my best to describe this to people who are just listening. We start with the map from 2020. And what we talk about with multiple paths to victory is that if we start with 2020 and say, how could this year differ? Of course, there are scenarios where Trump can win. Listen, if Trump flips Wisconsin and Michigan and Georgia, he wins. Even if he doesn't flip Wisconsin, but he grabs Arizona, he wins. Okay, so the point here is we can come up with a ton of scenarios where Trump wins. But the question is it likely Trump will win everything he won in 2020 plus more? It's not seeming super likely based on the polling. On the other hand, consider for a moment that Kamala Harris can afford to lose Georgia and Arizona, and she still has 276. Or conversely, she can afford to lose Wisconsin and Michigan, and she still has 278. Or looking further, if this North Carolina tie works out for Kamala Harris and she gets North Carolina, you can take away Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia, and she still wins. And of course, what we're talking about here is that the number of possible paths and the sort of margin of error that Kamala Harris has is significant compared to that of Donald Trump. There are single states, for example, if Donald Trump were to lose Pennsylvania, which he did in 2020, if he can't get Pennsylvania back, then there are multiple scenarios where Kamala Harris can lose 2 or 3 of the 5 critical battleground states and still win this election. So when we talk about multiple paths to victory, that's what we're talking about. This is not a foregone conclusion. The DNC hasn't even started. We've got weeks to go. A lot of different things can happen. We've had no debates yet between Harris and Trump. So all we're saying is there are paths to victory, all of which depend on our going out and voting. That's the thing to remember. Help us. Hey, folks, we got to 2.4 million YouTube subscribers. Let's do 2.5. Let's just do it. Let's get it over with. Let's move on beyond it. Subscribe at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. It's completely free. We'll take a quick break and be right back after this. Our sponsor, 8 Sleep, is the creator of the Pod, which can be added to your existing mattress like a fitted sheet to automatically cool down or warm up each side of your bed, and in turn improve your sleep quality dramatically. Meet their newest model, 8 Sleep's Pod 4 Ultra. It cools, it heats, and now it can elevate your head automatically. Pod 4 Ultra can cool down each side of the bed to 20 degrees below room temperature, keeping you and your partner cool even in a heat wave. The Pod can even detect your snoring and automatically lift your head by a few degrees to improve that airflow and stop your or your partner's snoring. There is nothing else like it on the market. I've been using 8 Sleep products for a long time, and it's one of the few things in my house that I couldn't go without now. Pod 4 Ultra also introduces an adjustable base that fits between your mattress and your bed frame to add reading and sleeping positions to help you unwind at night. Go to 8sleep.com/Pakman and use code Pakman to get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra. The link is in the description. The David Pakman Show is made possible by none other than you, our listeners, our viewers, particularly at this critical inflection point in American politics, where not only the next 4 years, but democracy and our political systems as we know them hang in the balance. We do need your support. I would ask you humbly, beautifully, to consider signing up for a membership at joinpakman.com. Thanks to the 150 folks who signed up over the weekend. I really appreciate you. We do lots of great things and provide many strong extras for our paid members at joinpakman.com. You can use the coupon code SaveDemocracy24. And remember that you can also pre-order my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine, at davidpakman.com/echo, or anywhere that books, ebooks, and or audiobooks are sold. We have a major contrast in rallies. We are now going to look at Donald Trump's rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Donald Trump suffered a loss of memory, language, and other executive functioning and cognitive abilities during this rally. He presented a dystopian and apocalyptic message for the future of the United States of America. Contrast that with the very positive message that we saw at the rally we looked at earlier for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. First and foremost, let me get out of the way that at a certain point in the rally, Donald Trump appeared not to know where he was. Despite the fact that the rally was in Pennsylvania, Trump talked about North Carolina. There has been an explanation issued for this. Let's take a look, and then I'll tell you what it is.
Speak a little bit longer. You know, how would you like it? A guy's waiting with his family for 3.5, 4 days. They have a tent, and the tent is set up. They have hundreds of them, and they wait. And then I walk in, speak for 15 minutes, and leave. I don't know. Somehow, would that be okay, North Carolina? I don't think so, right?
Okay, so, oh my goodness, Trump doesn't know where he is. He thinks he's in North Carolina. He's actually in Pennsylvania. We're going to get to the cognitive glitches. I don't believe this was one. There's a group of women from North Carolina that go to every Trump rally. And I believe Trump was pointing to that group of women who are often off to the side. So I don't think that's what it is being reported as. But there was plenty of bad. Here is a really weird glitch moment.
Whether we will make America powerful again, we're going to make it powerful.
Powerful. Okay, so really, really strange stuff. Trump, apropos of nothing, bringing up Barack Hussein Obama. And he even struggled to say his name. There was no reason to mention Obama, and yet Trump still could barely say his name.
Bush, Barack Hussein. Did you ever hear of Barack Hussein Obama? Have you heard of him?
Did you ever hear of? So Trump just really, really struggling. Trump then talking about TiVo, and well, listen to what he said, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it.
I had to play it back. You know, I love the playback controls you have nowadays. They used to call it TiVo. Now they have TiVo. I think it's the single greatest invention. It's better than television, because television would drive you crazy if you couldn't do a playback, right?
Right. Trump really interested and impressed by TiVo, technology invented in 1999. Definitely, it's an interesting way to remind the audience that you are indeed the oldest presidential nominee in American history. Remarking about 25-year-old technology is super interesting. And then, of course, people started walking out. Around the 1 hour mark, people started walking out. You see that the mezzanine is 2/3, 3/4 empty, and you will hear Trump droning on and see people leaving.
Thank you.
There you go.
New York.
Very exciting, as you can see, just electric, the atmosphere. And then some people also seemed to be sleeping. There were a number of folks who seemed to be asleep or almost asleep. I've not been able to independently confirm that all of these were in REM stage sleep. I can't say that, but certainly looked like a lot of sleeping was going on. Now, there's a new element of Donald Trump's greatest hits that he's including at every rally, which is the idea that you're now allowed to go into stores and steal, shoplift up to $1,000 of stuff. And then no one cares. This is a story that Trump is telling at every rally now.
She had something that she went with. You're not a criminal. It's a very minor offense if you steal anything from a store that's less than $950. Did you know that? So guys are walking into stores with a calculator. Keep it under 950 and nothing's going to happen. By the way, if it goes to 9,050, nothing happens either.
Yeah. So that's, of course, not true. Trump is referring to the fact that there are retail locations, and this has been the case. I mean, when I worked at Circuit City when I was 16, it was the same thing. We were always told, do not confront people that are stealing. At the time, it was mostly CDs, video games, stuff like that. Trump continuing to be confused about what tariffs are and how they work.
A tariff is a tax on a foreign country. That's the way it is, whether you like it or not. A lot of people like to say, oh, it's a tax on us. No. It's a tax on a foreign country. It's a tax on a country that's ripping us off and stealing our jobs. And it's a tax that doesn't affect our country. And
of course, none of that is true. I genuinely don't know whether Trump doesn't understand how tariffs work or he understands and he continues to lie about it. But of course, when American companies import things from China, the American company pays the tariff. Now, the idea that some adhere to is that China has to reduce the cost of what they sell us by the cost of the tariff. Otherwise, their product becomes uncompetitive. The problem is that when supply chains don't make it easy to source certain things from places other than China, China can just keep charging the same amount. And in fact, we have a very good study that the Trump administration's tariff on China cost each American household about $1,300 in 2020. That's according to the Congressional Budget Office. And that is, of course, a driver of inflation, which Trump likes to blame on Joe Biden. Every statement is either projection or ignorance. Trump, speaking of projection, Trump or about Trump's insecurities, Trump says he's more attractive than Kamala Harris. This is his new thing, which to me says Trump's very self-conscious about the fact that he's not as attractive as Kamala Harris.
Okay. She called it wrong. She's called it wrong now for about 8 years. But she said one thing that got me. She said Kamala has one big advantage. She's a very beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman. So I decided to go back and reread the clause. I'm not saying he's, but I say that I am much better looking than her. I think I'm much better. Much better. I'm
there
a
you
better
go.
looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't believe it. She said, I had never heard that one. They said, no, her biggest advantage is that she's a beautiful woman. I'm going, I never thought of that.
There you go. So very much indicative of Trump's insecurities. Trump continuing to attack Jewish Americans, saying that we need to have our heads examined.
And I'll tell you this, any Jewish person that votes for her or a Democrat has to go out and have their head examined.
There you go. I can assure you this is not helping Trump win the Jewish vote. As many of you, I'm sure, by now know that Jewish Americans and Black Americans are the two most left-wing voting groups. Trump's threats are not going to change that. And speaking of examining the heads of Jews, I mean, it's very ugly language, right? Hitler had plans to examine the heads of Jews. They called it phrenology. It's horrible, horrible stuff. I don't know that if I were Trump, I would be talking about the mass examination of Jewish heads. I just don't think so. Trump also talking about the laugh of Kamala Harris. He just can't get away from this, even though every sane Republican keeps saying this is don't, just don't.
She hasn't done anything, but she's prohibited from laughing. They said your laugh is horrible. Never laugh, ever. So she's walking around with her mouth like almost sealed shut. She won't laugh. I want her to laugh. And then we'll just claim victory. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much.
Yeah. So anyway, as you can tell, these comments from Trump, these are not very demure, that's for sure, I can tell you, and not very delicate and well thought out. And then finally, Donald Trump winding down, talking about how it's a very good thing that he calls us a nation in decline.
I use the term oftentimes in closing, we are a nation in decline. We are a failed nation. And I think it's a beautiful phrase, although I don't like the topic very much. I don't like what it represents, but there's a certain beauty. All of a sudden, all of these candidates, including Republicans, are saying we are a nation in decline. We are a failing nation. And I say, what the hell do they have to copy me for, right? But they have a lot of words that they copy. Many of our words we
Yes, Trump has some of the best words that are copied. So the contrast now that we can on the same day watch Trump's endless 2-hour rally, baseless as far as substance goes, riddled with glitches and confusion and attacks and ad hominems, and then a much shorter, tighter, more cohesive Harris Walz rally with a positive vision for America and some real energy. The contrast is fascinating. The contrast in terms of the attendees, also fascinating. Let's briefly touch on that. I want to play just one clip for you from a woman at Trump's rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania over the weekend. Often we would look at 5, 6, 7 different clips of rally goers. Not today. I want to play just 16 seconds for you and then discuss them because it gets to what is really, there's what they say about Democratic candidates who aren't white. And then there's what they mean about Democratic candidates who aren't white. Listen to this, see if you can figure it out.
That's because she's not real. We're real Americans. Yeah.
That's right. We're from here, and we're going to stay here, and we need Donald Trump back.
Here we go. And we believe in Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I believe in you guys.
And he's still our president anyways.
Yeah, why not?
And we all know
right.
that's for sure.
He's our president anyways. So they say, we are from here, unlike Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris, of course, is from here. She was born in Oakland, California. And this might start to sound a little bit like what they would say about Barack Obama, the birther movement, which, by the way, Donald Trump was a leading proponent and one of the loudest voices about. They didn't say it about Joe Biden, even though all three of them were born in the United States. Of course, it doesn't take much pattern recognition to realize that the difference is Joe Biden is white, whereas on the other hand, Barack Obama and Kamala Harris are not. And that is the source for questioning their legitimacy as, quote, real Americans. And it's really something more profound that it reveals about the political discourse, because these attacks, when they say she's not from here, it's not really about birthplace. It's not really about legal status. It's a reactionary effort to delegitimize the presence of people of color in the highest echelons of power. The simple analysis is they only think of white people as really being from here. I don't think that probably applies to some of these people, but I don't think that's the broader explanation. It's more about they aren't legitimate to be in positions of power. To be truly American such that you are allowed to be president or vice president, there is this narrow, racially coded vision. Obama doesn't meet that vision. Kamala Harris doesn't meet that vision. The standard is white, Christian, steeped in a specific set of cultural norms, which historically have excluded large swaths of the population. And so when I hear critics say Obama's not really from here, Kamala Harris isn't really from here, it's not about geography, right? You can pull out a map and show them, here's Oakland, it's California, it's part of the United States, here's Hawaii. They are questioning belonging. They are questioning, or expressing, maybe better said, discomfort with the idea that who is leading the country has changed. Leadership can look different than it used to. It's a dog whistle to those threatened by diversity and to those who view the advancement of people of color as challenging their own standing. So, yeah, okay, but she's not from here. It's not really about geography. It's about more. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. Don't forget that the best way to support The David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. One of the surefire signs that you know you're losing and you have no real way to explain it away is when you're presented with information that is inconvenient to you. You say, that's the media's fault. That's all it is. And this is what we see in J.D. Vance's latest failed interview, this time on Fox News. As a reminder, J.D. is not very good at this. J.D. at every opportunity is either putting his foot in his mouth during an interview or during a rally, or even forgetting where he is, which we will get to in a moment. So let's start with J.D. Vance yesterday on the Sunday shows. He was on Fox News Sunday speaking to Shannon Bream, and with a straight face, he says she is using fake polls to deduce that the numbers are worsening for Trump, Vance. I don't think Shannon Bream offers any pushback here. Let's take a look.
How does that not line up then with another poll we got out this morning, Washington Post, ABC? They're giving the vice president nationally a 4 to 5 point lead. Those are new numbers. So if you think the momentum is not swinging, or your internal polls are suggesting differently, every other poll that's been released has shown great momentum in her direction.
You know, Shannon, I think there are a lot of polls that actually show her stagnating and leveling off. Of course, ABC Washington Post was a wildly inaccurate pollster in the summer of 2020. And look, if you see the numbers that we're seeing and you actually talk to the American people, I feel extremely confident that we're going to be in the right place come November. We can't worry about polls. We have to run through the finish line and encourage everybody to get out there and vote. But our message is going to be very simple. If you want to get back to the peace and prosperity, the rising take-home pay, Donald Trump delivered it once and he can do it again. If you want to double down on the failed policies that have delivered higher food prices and higher housing prices, well, Kamala Harris has been vice president for 3.5 years, and I guarantee she's going to make the problem worse if the American people give her a promotion.
So
the thing we have to remember, one final point, let me just say one final point on this, Shannon, because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Consistently, what you've seen in 2016 and 2020 is that the media uses fake polls to drive down Republican turnout and to create dissension and conflict with Republican voters. I'm telling you, every single person who's watching this, the Trump campaign is in a very, very good spot. We're going to win this race. We just have to run through the finish line.
It's one of the things that is often said, by Trump, and now obviously JD has become his doormat, so he says it as well. It's often said fake polls that show your candidate losing are used to drive down turnout. They've never demonstrated that that's the case. And in fact, one could argue, if I see a poll that my candidate's winning by 10, I don't feel super incentivized to vote because my candidate doesn't need my vote. On the other hand, if I see my candidate losing by 3, you can make the very good argument that that would inspire you to go and vote because it's like, oh, my candidate needs me. Now I've got to get active because my candidate might lose unless I vote. So that idea that you use fake polls to drive down turnout doesn't make any sense. Now, to drive dissension, J.D. Vance's favorability numbers are in the toilet. I don't know if he's alluding to his poor numbers are a way to get Trump upset with him so that the conversation about whether to replace him gets going. His numbers are a disaster. These are polling agencies that have been doing this for a very long time. They didn't appear in 2024 in order to create bad numbers about J.D. Vance. They've been doing these things more or less the same way for decades. He's got the worst numbers of any vice presidential pick. That's all. And so if that leads to Trump questioning his selection of J.D. Vance, that's because of the numbers. It's not because the polls are fake. And at the end of the day, how many damn times do I have to tell you people the polls are fake when Trump is losing, but the polls are real when Trump is winning, including like 3-4 months ago when the polls were looking good for Trump and not so good for Joe Biden. They were real then. The very same polls are fake now. Now, the interview didn't get any better for J.D. Vance as it continued. He is claiming that Kamala Harris's campaign is really, really worried about where they are, which, I mean, listen, the Kamala Harris campaign is not assuming they've got this thing in the bag. But if you suddenly become the nominee and less than a month later see a complete turnaround in the polling, that doesn't worry you, that inspires you.
I mean, our Fox News polling does show the economy is the #1 issue and that people do give you all the edge on that. And yet, this is what we have out from some new polling out of the New York Times. They say Ms. Harris is now leading Mr. Trump among likely voters in Arizona, 50-45, and is even edged ahead of Mr. Trump in North Carolina, a state Mr. Trump won 4 years ago, while narrowing his lead significantly in Georgia and Nevada. What is the administration doing, the campaign doing with that data as it comes in? I mean, these are critical states that you got to have a path to 270. Are there any pivots? Are there any, reconfiguring of what you're doing in the strategy? Because you talk about your message, but is it not landing?
Well, let me say two things about this, Shannon. First of all, the polls tend to radically overstate Democrats. We certainly saw that during the polling of summer of 2020 and summer of 2016. And of course, a lot of those polls were wrong when it came to Election Day. The second thing I'll say, Shannon, is what we have certainly seen is that Kamala Harris got a bit of a sugar high a couple of weeks ago. But what we've actually seen from our own internal data, Shannon, is that Kamala Harris has already leveled off. If you talk to insiders in the Kamala Harris campaign, they're very worried about where they are because the
really worried. Now, just about everything he said there is a lie. And you may recall that while the polls in 2016 were not particularly good at predicting the electoral outcome because we have an electoral college, the polls were very good at predicting the ultimate popular vote results of 2016, which were that Hillary Clinton did defeat Donald Trump in the popular vote. Now, finally, Here is J.D. Vance waxing poetic about how great things were under Trump.
Economists have said those tariffs, along with mass deportations that would impact the workforce, will also drive up prices for Americans.
Well, Shannon, I don't buy that argument because Donald Trump was already president. He already secured the wall. He already implemented tariffs, which brought back 12,000 American factories were built during Donald Trump's administration, and prices were low and take-home pay was high. The entire argument of the Kamala Harris campaign boils down to forget how good things were when Donald Trump was president. Forget that we had rising take-home pay. Forget that we had low inflation. Forget that we had peace all over the world. And somehow, if you give Kamala Harris more power than she already has, she's somehow going to do something different than she's done for the past 3.5 years, Shannon.
You can tell that JD is lying because his lips are moving. Of course, Trump's tariffs didn't help the economy. They generated about $1,300 in additional spending per family per year. When Trump left office, we were in the middle of quarantines and mass COVID death and complete and total political insanity. So his his kind of revisionist history about how great everything was under Trump really leaves something to be desired. Another failed interview for JD. JD Vance forgot where he was the other day, and he pulled out a card to remind himself. And the point here, of course, is that when Joe Biden had a card with information about what he was up to, it was evidence of his very serious dementia. Well, J.D. Vance did the same thing.
It's great to be here. It's great to be part of VFW Post 92. I've actually got the card right here in my pocket.
Yeah.
I'm officially a member.
I have the card here in my pocket, which I just pulled out in order to remind myself of where it is that I am, because I both don't know and don't care. I don't have a ton to say about this. It's not really about this happening once to JD. It's about how this was a sign of Biden's incompetence. This was a sign of Biden's dementia. This was a sign of Biden's inability to do anything. And it wasn't even that Biden was forgetting where he was. It was simply that Biden was handed a card before every event, which, by the way, most presidents are, with sort of like who we're talking to, how long we're going to be here, information and details about all of it. Just having a card for Joe Biden was evidence that he simply can't do the job. J.D. Vance needed the card to remind himself, where am I? I'm at the VFA? No, it's actually the VFW. Oh, okay. Let's just remember that these people don't really have principles, and every analysis is informed only by what can I say right now that will try to make them look bad and me look good. And if tomorrow I have to say the exact opposite because circumstances change, then so be it, because consistency, double standards, and hypocrisy don't matter anymore. That's at the core what this is really about. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. We continue to see Republicans slowly realizing, damn, Trump really may lose this thing, and I'd better put a word in here or there just so it can be made clear that I thought maybe this was going to happen. Now, I saw some comments from you. We'll get to this Lindsey Graham clip in a moment. I saw some comments from some of you on the subreddit over the weekend saying, you know, when David says these Republicans are trying to get on the record saying, hey, you know what? I said this wasn't looking so good. What David's ignoring is that they're not going to acknowledge that Trump lost. They're simply going to try to steal it. Now, it is absolutely true that if it is very close, if it's a very small margin of victory in just a couple of states, Trump will certainly claim that it was stolen and that he actually won. Some Republicans will join him in arguing that, and some will not. On the other hand, if we overwhelm the vote and we make Trump face the landslide that he has the potential of facing, it's going to be such an overwhelming victory that even if Trump claims he actually won, a lot of these Republicans aren't going to be able to go with it. They will see that it's over. They will see that Trump's not going to run in 2028. They will see that it's going to be time for the Republican Party to change or die. And they are going to want to say, I saw this coming. I warned about it. That's the reason why this is happening. We start with Lindsey Graham on Meet the Press yesterday, where he says there is a Donald Trump that can win this election, but Donald Trump, the provocateur and showman, may not win. And of course, that's the guy that we're getting.
Question here,
Right.
Senator Graham.
How can you be for the Green New Deal? Wait a minute. How can you be for the Green New Deal and not be opposed to fracking?
Well,
That's BS.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let me ask you, big picture, bottom line me here. Do you think former President Trump should stop talking about Vice President Harris's race and intelligence?
Yeah, I think in my view is that me and Nikki need to go to Georgia. We're giving advice on TV to President Trump. He's got a lot of critics. He's got a lot of advisors. But to Nikki Haley and DeSantis and Youngkin and all these great people we have, let's get together and actually campaign for the guy rather than just give advice. But in the advice-giving column, here's what I would say. President Trump can win this election. His policies are good for America, and if you have a policy debate for president, he wins. Donald Trump, the provocateur, the showman, may not win this election. So I'm looking for President Trump to show up in the last 80 days to define what he will do for our country, to fix broken borders, to lower inflation.
It's not obvious to me that Trump defining what he will do is actually going to help him, because on the rare occasion where he says what he will do, it's horrible. More tariffs that will cause inflation for the average American family, destroying health care if we let him get away with it, if the House and Senate let him get away with it, trying to rehabilitate the failed wall program, replacing career bureaucrats with political actors at all levels of government in order to staff federal government agencies with cult-like loyalists to do a whole bunch of different things outlined in Project 2025, continuing to select radical justices and judges for all level of courts. I can go on and on and on. A chilling effect on media by going after media outlets he doesn't like. On the one hand, Trump barely talks about policy, and Lindsey Graham says that's bad. On the other hand, when Trump does talk about policy, which there's rarely any, explanation of how he'll implement it, but still the ideas are absolutely terrible. But the guy that's here for now, if you watch the rallies and the interviews and the press conference, it's mostly the provocateur, the wannabe showman, although the shows are increasingly boring. And as we saw people in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania over the weekend leaving while Trump was speaking. Now, that's Lindsey setting himself up. Trump, the showman, may well lose. Well, it's the showman. Here is Republican governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu. And he says, there is no doubt that the things Trump has been saying are asinine. However, I'm still voting for the guy. He's still the best choice.
President Trump compared giving the Presidential Medal of Freedom to top Republican donor Miriam Adelson to giving the Medal of Honor to American service members who risk their lives in battle. Take a listen.
It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. It's right. And they're rated equal.
The head of the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, said, quote, "These asinine comments not only diminish the significance of our nation's highest award for valor, but also crassly characterizes the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives above and beyond the call of duty," unquote. Do you agree with the VFW?
Yeah, there were asinine comments. There's no doubt about that. Again, I don't think they're the first asinine comments former President Trump has ever made. I don't think they'll be a game changer in terms of the election. When you're talking about, what it takes for someone to stand up and protect this country, it's uncomparable, I think, right? It stands alone in its own lane in terms of the honor, especially when you're talking about the Congressional Medal of Honor. What Trump needs to be focusing on, if he ever brings up the military, is what it takes to keep America strong across the world, how to bring world peace in
All right, you get the point. So Chris Sununu says the comments are asinine, but we're voting Trump and it's all going to be fine. The way it basically works is Jake Tapper or whoever, they bring on one of these Trump supporters and they say, hey, do you defend these particular comments? And then the person will say, no, I don't defend the particular comments, but I'm going to kind of dance around here a little bit. And at the end of my statement, what I will be communicating is that while these comments aren't things I would say, Trump is still the best choice. I'm still not voting for a Democrat, and the comments won't really matter because Donald Trump has already shown people who he is. It's already baked in. It's already priced in. The alternative is crazy. Sununu doesn't go this way. Some will go, it's crazy communist socialism, Marxism from Kamala Harris, or it's DEI or whatever. And I'm going to go home and still be relatively satisfied with my choice to be supporting Donald Trump. That's basically the way it works. They are leaving a 1%, like an eject button to just get out, right? Escape the plane before it hits the ground, to be able to say, I was concerned about the asinine comments. I did call them asinine. Or Lindsey Graham. I said that Trump, the showman, would lose, but I hoped it wouldn't be the showman. But it was, and he lost. So I was right all along. That's what they're lining up here. Trump's not taking any of their advice. Part of it is evidenced by what happened on Truth Social yesterday. Donald Trump exploded in another fit of rage and triggeredly mania with 22 posts in an hour to Truth Social, if you can believe it.
Truth Central.
I'll just give you a little bit of a sense of the stuff that he wrote. We had to turn away lots of people in Wilkes-Barre, but Comrade Kamala social media operation showed empty seats long before the rally started. Early in the afternoon, we had to turn away 11,000 people. Trump's lying. We have video of Trump speaking and people are walking away. But Trump is so self-conscious about his shrinkage and the size of his crowd that he posted multiple times videos purporting to show a full place. He continues to refer to her as Comrade Kamala Harris, saying she is a communist and has always been a communist and will always be a communist. Of course, many on the left say she's too much of a capitalist. I don't like her for that reason. He posted content critical of Don Lemon for no real reason. And one really, really wacky thing that Trump did is he posted sort of a collage of fake Swifties for Trump, the idea of Taylor Swift supporters turning and saying, she endorses Trump, Taylor wants you to vote for Trump. It's all fake. And Trump posted it along with the phrase, I accept, seemingly thinking that he is accepting an endorsement from Taylor Swift, who, of course, has not endorsed Donald Trump. It was AI generated and complete and total nonsense. Going back to Trump's Truth Social, it's endless. I'm just scrolling. The New York Post cover that says communism. Kamala is an actual communist. Kamala keeps talking about what she will do on day one. She's a communist. It's a family thing. It's not even worth looking at it in detail. This is the behavior of an unhinged, out of control guy who can't take it that she's catching up and has surpassed Trump in polling. She's got larger crowds, even though the left doesn't hang its hat on crowd size, as we learned in 2020. And she is potentially going to make Trump look like a fool in a debate that, in some sense, Trump had to agree to, because the risks of saying I won't be there would have been, as Anthony Scaramucci told us a couple weeks ago on the show, self-emasculating to Donald Trump. So he is not in good shape. The DNC starts tonight. I'm very curious to see what that does to Trump as far as his Truth Social posting. All right, I will have an update for you about book pre-orders tomorrow. The goal is to get to 1,000 pre-orders for my book very quickly. I was told by my publisher, listen, David, sir, you've got to manage expectations. Very few books sell 5,000 copies. The average for like a commercial release is 2,000 copies. The average in general for books is like 300 copies. As of last week, we had about 700 pre-orders, trying to get to 1,000. I would love to have your help in that. You can pre-order the book in ebook, Kindle, audiobook, or just a regular old paper book format at davidpakman.com/echo or on any website that sells books, audiobooks, or ebooks. You can send your pre-order receipt to info@davidpakman.com. We're sort of tracking them. We have a tremendous bonus show for you today. We are going to start digging into the Kamala Harris agenda to the extent that she has talked about it and released some agenda documents. Number 2, 5 of Pennsylvania's fake Trump electors from 2020 are back, and they are on Trump's 2024 slate. Are we doing this all over again? We may be. And finally, George Santos, Emmy Award-winning producer and actor and inventor of the Hadron Collider, George Santos, will be pleading guilty today to multiple criminal charges of fraud. Is he likely to serve prison time? Well, that's the question we will discuss. All of it on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com. Get instant access. Join me for the DNC live streams, and I will be back with the Tuesday show tomorrow. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. 8 Sleep makes a product that is amazing, which I love. It's called the Pod, and it fits around your existing mattress and cools down your bed so you can sleep better. They just released the newest model called the Pod 4 Ultra, which in addition to cooling down or heating up your bed, can even lift up your head when you're snoring so you can breathe better. It's incredible. To get $350 off, go to 8sleep.com/Pacman and use code Pacman. The link is in the description.